All right, 7:30. It's go time. All right, so first thing we will do is cover over the class materials for this week. Then I don't plan on talking too much about the assignment because what you need to do for the assignment this week is really what was covered in last week's material. And also I covered a lot in last week's video that directly relates to what your assignment is. So you can ask questions about the assignment, certainly, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have for the assignment, but I'm probably not going to go over anything about the assignment here today unless you ask me about it. Refer to last week's video for a lot of information on the assignment. Okay, so there's really two topics that were discussed that were part of this week's class materials. They're not even really related to each other. So it's kind of two distinct, separate ideas. And the first one is called recursion. So recursion is when you have a method that calls itself to get work done. That's what recursion is you have a method and you call that method. And in order to figure out the answer, the method will call itself. And we call that recursion. The best example for that, in my opinion, is the Fibonacci sequence. So let's look at the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence looks like this. The first two values in the sequence are 0 and 1. Just by definition, is 0 and 1. But the way the Fibonacci sequence works is the next item in the sequence is the sum of the previous two. So if you take 0 plus 1, the answer is 2. If we take 1 plus 2, the answer is 3. 2 plus 3, the answer is 5. So let me see if I make this bigger. Let me see if I can make the font size bigger on this real fast. Actually, it's a Control plus. All right, dang it. Shift plus. No. I should have made this font bigger before we started. Is it settings? Yep, edit. I think it's an editor. Font. Yep, there we go. Let's make this font size 16. Something easier to see. Does that look good? And let's make it a little bit bigger than that. Let's make it 18. Apply. That should be fine. All right, that's fine. Okay, so then we got 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. We should do a couple more of them. 8 plus 13 is 21. 21 plus 13 is 34. Then it's 55. Then it's 89, and so on and so forth. Then it goes forever. So this is the Fibonacci sequence. All right. So manually computing it, we see this is what the sequence should be. So let's make a program that will compute the Fibonacci sequence for us. Okay. And it'll compute it up to how many ever places that we want to compute it to. Okay. So give me 1 second. Okay, so let's make a method to compute the Fibonacci sequence. Private static, it'll return to us an integer, and we just call it Fibonacci, and it takes as a parameter the nth one that you want to compute. So if n is 5, we want to compute the index 5. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we actually compute that 8. If this was 3, we would compute 0, 1, 2, 3. We would compute that one. So as I said, the Fibonacci has two base cases where the first two numbers are automatically given. So if n is 0, if we're computing the first one, so if n is equal to the 0 index, then the answer is just 0. Else, if n is the first index, so this is 0 index, this is the first index. If it's the first index, then the answer is 1. Now here's where it gets more complicated. If it's not either of those two things, then what is it? So if it's the second index, meaning 0, 1, 2, if it's this index, what is it? I mean, I could put if n is equal to the second index, then return 2. If n is the third index, return 3. If n is, and so on and so forth till the end of time, right? But what if we want the 1,000,000th index? Well, if that's the case, it's not very practical to write a million if-else cases, right? But we do need them for the start of the sequence. Meaning, if we're at the 0, we don't have 2 previous numbers to compute it by, right? So this is just by definition, it's 0. The same thing for 1. We have 1 previous number, but we need 2 previous numbers, which we don't have. So by definition, the answer is 1. But from here on out, if it's above this, we do, for number 2, we do have 2 previous numbers that we can add. Actually, did I mess up the sequence? Yes, I'm sorry. There should be a 1 in there. I think I accidentally deleted that. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Yeah, okay, that's right. Right. So for this index, there are 2 previous numbers for us to sum together. So in the general case, we take the 2 previous numbers summed together, right? So it is a return of the Fibonacci of n minus 2 plus the Fibonacci of n minus 1. Now, does that give us the right thing? So let's imagine n is 7. Which one is the 7th index? That's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 13. The 7th index is 13. So to get the 7th index, we need to add, if n is 7, so this is 5, and this is 6. So it's saying, what's the Fibonacci at the 6th and at the 5th and the 6th locations? So the Fibonacci at the 5th location is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is this. The Fibonacci at the 6th location is this. And that indeed does give us the answer there. So what makes this recursive is we have the method Fibonacci. We have a couple of base cases where by definition, this is what those values are. And then for anything else, to get the Fibonacci value, we call the Fibonacci function again itself, just with smaller values of n. And what this will do, it'll keep recursing within itself until it gets down to these base cases. So let's see if this actually works. So let's do a loop for int I equals 0 all the way up to 10. I less than 10 plus I. And let's print out the Fibonacci at each of those. So we'll do a system.out.println. So we'll say at index I, the Fibonacci is Fibonacci of I. So that'll run through 0 all the way up to 9 inclusive and print out the answer. Let's save it and let's run it. And does it give us the right answer? So let's look. So if we look here, and so it goes 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 34. So that's fine. But I mean, it works good for that, but you can do that as many numbers as you want. This goes up to 10,000. Let's run it. May take a second. What do we see here? What's going on? look how slow this has become. That is one downside of having recursion. Actually, I'm going to stop the program. See how slowly it's running now. That's one of the downsides of recursion. Recursion can actually get slow if you don't optimize it. And this is really unoptimized, but it's fine for our example. So this is what recursion looks like. You have a method that, to get its job done, it calls itself with different values. And you have to make sure you have base case values where it doesn't call itself. Okay, so that's recursion in a nutshell. Computing the Fibonacci sequence is a use case for that. You don't see it too much in programming, but it is there from time to time. And that's it. That is recursion. Okay, so let's talk about the other more exciting thing for the week is GUI programming. GUI is nicer to look at than the command line, right? So most of all your past programming assignments were probably all just command line type things, you know, getting keyboard or getting input from the keyboard on the command line, printing things back on the command line, and things like that, right? Let's make windows and buttons and stuff we can click and an actual user interface that a user may use. Okay, so let's talk about windows and message boxes and edit boxes and buttons and stuff like that. So the first thing we'll look at is creating a pop-up message box. Okay, let's say we just want to display a quick pop-up to the user that whatever message we want to have. So in Java, we have a framework called Swing. It's Java Swing. And what that is a bunch of code that other people wrote that do a lot of the GUI stuff for us, but they give us methods and classes that we can use to produce GUIs on the screen. All right. So one of the things is a thing called JOptionPane. JOptionPane is a class, and it has a method called showMessageDialog. Now you can see here it takes 2 parameters. This isn't very useful about what the parameters should be, which is why we have documentation. You can always go look up the documentation for what you should give it. But I know the first parameter should be, what is the parent GUI for this message box? And we don't have one yet because we don't have any other GUI components. So let's say it's null. There is no parent for this. And then the second parameter is, what is the message we want the message box to show? I'm just going to put, this is my message box. Okay. And that's it. That is all the code we need to write to have a message box pop up. So let's run it. I'm actually using the IDE this time. This is IntelliJ or JetBrains IntelliJ. I like it, but there we go. All right, so there we go. So we get this message box. So we got the show message dialog. It has no parent, and the message is, this is my message box. And there it is. This is my message box. That's all the code we needed to do to get this fully functional message box to pop up. Of course, we can make the message anything we want. Anything we want. If we run it, of course, it's a message box with anything we want. That's how easy it is to make a message box. Okay, let's look at something more useful. Let's look at a window. You know, a window that we can drag around the screen, maximize, minimize, anything that we want. So the Java idea of this for Swing is called a J-frame. J-frame is a window. Okay, so let's make a new window. We'll call it window, J-frame window. We'll make it with a new J-frame. Inside here, we give it the parameters, and you can see the different parameters we can give it. But the useful one is the title. And I'm just going to call it title. Okay. Now there's a few options you can set with the window. For example, we can set its size. How big do we want the window? Let's make it 256 by 256. That's how big we want the window. we can set its location on our screen, the initial location. Let's say it's at 200, 300 on our screen. Okay. And then the last thing you need to do is we need to make it visible. That means actually show it. And that's all there is. If we run this, we should get a window on our screen that we can drag around and move. Let's run it. There's our window. It has this title. It is 256 by 256 in size. The initial location, is over here somewhere. That's the initial location, 200, 300. And then set visible makes it actually visible to us. Now, something you should note here is our main function ended, didn't it? After we did Windows set visible, that was the end of our main function. So normally in our just console programs, our command line programs, we expect that after the last code in main executes, that the program would just terminate, right? What's a little bit different when you're talking about GUI programs, user interface programs. They use what we call an event-driven model, meaning you don't have code in here that's constantly executing over and over and over. You're waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for the user to click the maximize button. You're waiting for the user to click the minimize button. You're waiting for the user to click the X button. So on and so forth. You're waiting for all that to happen. And so you do have the opportunity to specify what happens when any of those actions take place. For example, here shortly, we'll be adding a button to the window. And so the button code will not run unless you tell it what to do when the button's clicked on. Okay, so that's what a frame is. A frame is just a window. Okay, and these are the three most useful methods. Okay, so how do we put something in the window? How do we put like a button, a text editor, any other number of things? How do we put those in the window for the user to interact with? Okay, we have this concept of a J panel. A J panel is a rectangular area that can hold other GUI controls. Think of it like a container for other GUI stuff. And we'll see this in action here now. So let's make a J panel called content. Let's make a new J panel. You don't need any parameters to it. And so what we have to do to make this panel part of the window, we have window.set content pane and this content. So that means this panel is what's going to be in the content portion of that JFrame window. Let's run it. Right now, you're not going to see any difference. If you run it, right now, it doesn't look any different. I understand that, but just know that here in this white section, there is now a J panel called content, and we can add stuff to this J panel to do useful stuff with. All right, let's stop it. So let's say we want to add a button. Well, we have something called J button. J button. We'll make a new J button, and in here for the parameter, you put whatever text you want displayed on the button. Let's say click me. Okay. Now we need to add this button to the content. The way we do that is content.add the button. It's easy as that. Let's run it. Now we'll see a window with a click me button. What happens when we click it? Nothing is happening yet because we made a button and we added the button, but we didn't tell our program what to do when the button is clicked. So we can click it, but it's not doing anything yet. Okay. So how do we tell it to do something? Well, we have a function called button.addActionListener. And then we can make a new action listener. and it adds all the stuff in here for us. And so there's this function called action performed. So this code is executed when the button is clicked. Java is doing a lot of behind the scenes work in this swing library that it will call this function for us whenever we click the button. I don't need to say button.click run this. Right? If button is clicked, then action perform. This is like pseudocode. This is what we don't do. We don't do something like this. The way Java Swing works is we had a button, we added an action listener to it, we made a new listener that has this method action performed, and so Java Swing will call this method for us whenever I click the button. So let's say whenever I click the button, let's display a message box. So what was that? It was the J options pane dot show message dialog. We can still put null for parent, that's fine. And we'll say you clicked the button, right? So when the user clicks this button, it's going to run this method. And then we're saying in that method, just show a message box. All right, let's run it. There we go. Click me. So click it. Oh, there it popped up. You click the button. Okay. And you can click it multiple times. There you go. Click the button. There you go. Every time you click this button, it runs this action performed method. Okay. So just a button by itself, it doesn't do us a lot of good. Let's allow the user to type something in. We have another, if we want the user to give us input, we have what we call a J text field. Let's call it field 0. Let's make a new text field. Oh, no. J text field. Yep. It doesn't need any parameters. You can look up the documentation if you want to give it to parameters to tweak it. So for field 0, let's just add it to our form, add it to our content. Content.add the field 0. That's it. So now we'll have on our window a text field we can type in. Oh, where did it go? What did I do wrong? One second, I must have typed in something wrong. Oh, always during demonstrations, huh? Okay, so we have the text field. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why it's not. Let me give it one of these parameters. Let me give it this string, see if that gets it up on there. It should be added on there for us. No. Oh, see, I'm doing something wrong. Oh, I think it's the set columns. Yeah, I think because it has a size of 0. Columns 20. What have I done? Let's take this out for a second and run it. There's a click me button. Obviously, I've done something terribly wrong. Let's try it one more time. Text field. Content, add field 0. Let's leave off the button for a second. You see troubleshooting live. Why is it not showing my text field? All right, I'll have to come back to that. I really do not understand why it's not showing my text field. All right. All right, so let's just go back to just the button. So there is a text field that you can use to gather user input. Let's say if we want to draw some graphics instead of getting text input. Well, as we talked about in weeks prior, Java has this concept of inheritance and, having classes that extend other classes. So, as I said, the content of a JFrame window is really boils down to the JPanel, especially the base for everything that you want to do GUI-wise. So let's make our own JPanel class, our own class that extends JPanel, and do some graphics drawing with it. So let's have a new class, public static class. We'll just call it my graphics panel. Okay. We'll say it extends JPanel. And what does that mean when we extends it? That means, as we talked about previous classes, it means this graphics panel class, it is a JPanel, meaning it has all the same stuff a JPanel has, but it can do more stuff than just JPanel. We want to add additional functionality to it. And the way we do that in JPanel is we want to override the paint component method. All right, public void. Is that not working right for me? All right, paint. All right. I want to override the public void paint component. Is the graphics. Java AWT graphics. Well, I did not expect to be struggling with this one. Yeah, I think that's right. Graphics G. All right. Interface. I'll enter. Why is this giving me such a hard time right now? This was working earlier. Public void paint component. Graphics G. Graphics. This. Oh, because it's paint component, not pane. There we go. It's paint component, not pane component. That makes sense. Okay. There. This is a little bit better. Okay. All right. So we have this, our own panel that we're making called my graphics panel. And we have this method that we're overriding paint component. What Java Swing is smart enough to do. Yeah, I see your thing in there now. I was putting pane component instead of paint component. That was what was throwing me off. Okay. So what we can do with this graphics object, there's lots of graphics type stuff we can do with it. And Java Swing is smart enough to know whenever your panel needs to be drawn to the screen, meaning, when we create the window and show the window on the screen, Java Swing will call this paint component method. And so whatever you do in here is what will be drawn on that panel. So the basic example is we can do graphics dot draw string. So what we can do, we can draw a string to the screen, right? Let's say this is my string. And then you can put at what position? Let's put it at 10, 20. There we go. Now, what we do want to do, we want to put super dot paint component on here. Why do we want to do that? So when we override a method, paint component, the base class JPanel, it already does some painting type stuff, right? So when we call super dot paint component, we're telling it, okay, JPanel, I want you to do your paint component method and then continue on with my code. And what is done in the JPanel's paint component, it does some erasing, it does painting the background and some other stuff like that. And so we're just telling you, okay, JPanel, go ahead and paint your background, the stuff you normally do. And then also I want you to draw this string. Okay, so here instead of the JPanel content, let's do my graphics panel. And we'll set that as the content on the window. Let's run it. And there we go. The button's kind of hidden behind there, or the text is hidden behind the button. That's some layout type stuff that you'll have to work through to get it positioned right. But there it is. There's the button, and there's that graphics. And for the graphics, we just drew a string, right? There's lots of other stuff you can do in here besides draw string. You can like a draw a rounded rect, or we can do, let's do a fill rectangle. Okay. So for fill rect, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, it takes 4 parameters, and it's basically the top left corner and the width and height, I believe. So let's draw a rectangle from 10, 10 over to 200, 200 for the width and height. We can draw a filled in rectangle. Let's run that. There we go. There's that rectangle. It's still drawing the string underneath it, but the rectangle is being drawn on top of it. That's why you can't see it. So let's swap them around. Let's fill the rectangle and then draw the string on top of it. But we also need to change what color we draw it, because if the string is the same color as the rectangle, then you can't see it. So let's do this dot set color. Let's make the color dot red text. And for the rectangle, we can set the color before it to blue or whatever color we want. So this is saying anytime this panel is drawn, I want you to do the JPanel painting. Then I want you to set the color to blue, draw a rectangle in that color, set the color to red, and draw a string in that color. Okay, let's run that. You see, we got our window. There it is. Blue rectangle, red text, and that button is still on there. Still doing the same thing it was doing from down here. Okay. That's some of the graphics on there. What else can you do with it? We can have, let's take the text off of there. So we have the button on there. We can make a label, J label. So label is just some text drawn directly into the window. It's not editable text. It's just text that's displayed. So let's make a J label. So there's a new J label. Parameters are, there's parameters with a string and some icons and stuff like that. Let's just make text. This is a label. let's hope this one works. Content.add components, just label. All right. Run that. I think the problem may be that I don't have a layout set, which I think I forgot to do. Yeah, it's messed up again. What I failed to do is make the layout. And the layout basically says how are the components, the subcomponents, how are they arranged in your window? Are they side by side? Are they one underneath the other? What was the case? So let's make them have a layout. So we have our content here. Let's set the contents layout. So it says how things are arranged in it. Set layout. And we'll have, let's just do a box layout. Container is that content. There we go. That's it. Let's just do a new box layout. It's a new border layout. There's a bunch of different layouts you can do. You can look in the documentation for them. Let's see if this arranges the things like we want them. There we go. So there's the click me. Actually, the click me is taking up the whole room. Well, at least we got it on there now. Okay. So when we're making the add button, let's say we have the button on here. Let's make it order layout. And a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about right now, it is not there. It is talked about directly in the weeks code, the weeks examples. So let's add the button. Border layout south, that just means put it on the bottom. So for the label, let's try to make it on the top. Having trouble typing today. Give that a go. There we go. There's our label. Our button is actually probably underneath this. Yeah, the button was underneath that. There it is. There's our button. There's our label. There's where we're drawing the rectangle with the panel. Okay. You can also put panels inside of panels. So let's go back to this. Let's go back to what we had originally, a J panel. J panel. This will be our main content that covers the entire window. Content.set layout. We'll have a border layout. Content pane. Content. All right, so that's back to what we originally had. So we can have our own panel as a sub panel, right? So let's just call this my panel. So it'll be a graphics panel. And let's add it to the window. Window.add my panel at, what do we have? The border layout dot let's put it on east, whatever. And let's make this rectangle. It draws much smaller. Actually, what we can do here, we can make the rectangle draw the whole thing, the whole area. So we can draw it from 0, 0, and then we can get how big this panel is. This dot, what was it? Get width. This dot get height. So this will get how big the panel is and just draw to the whole thing of it, right? And so we make the panel and we add it to the content. Let's run that, see what it looks like. There we go. So we need to drag this out some more. Okay, well, that's how big the panel is now. But there we have our label, there we have our button. Okay. There's lots of ways that you can arrange the content in here. I'm not going to go through and try to cover all of them. It's in the week's reading materials. But this is how we can add things on here. All right. I really want to show you that text button. So let's try that text button again. Let's get rid of this graphics panel and the label. Let's just have the button. Let's have the J text field, field 0. There's a new J text field. Say it's this big. Content.add component. We'll add this field 0 and we'll add it at border layout. See if we can add it at the top. Because showing this text field is actually pretty important for future assignments you need to do. Let's make this bigger. There it is. I guess it was just hidden. You couldn't really see it, the size I had the window. All right, so we got this text field. As you can see, we can type into it. Okay. So let's do something useful with that. So let's say whenever the button is clicked, let's show that as the message. So let's get the message. We can do that with make a new variable string message. So we can say field 0. I think it's get text. Yep, get text. So this will get the text of whatever you typed in that field. And let's display that in the message box. Let's run that. There we go. Let's maximize it. All right. This is what I typed in. Let's click the button. And he's there. This is what I typed in. Now, why is this useful? Oh, there it is. So let's make two text fields. Let's say we want to make a calculator, right? Make two text fields. And then when we click the button, let's add them together. So num0 and whoops, paste, dang it. So a string, actually be integer, yeah, num0 equals, was it integer.parse. And so we want to get the integer that's in field 0. That'll be our first number. We'll have another number from field 1. Let's add them together. And then let's show that in the message box. The sum is, oops, there we go. So I just now made a basic calculator with this GUI. Save it. Maximize it, minimize it. So I think both the text fields are in there. This is really not my day right now. Okay. I think because they're on top of each other. Like one on the east and one on the west. Something. A lot of your work will be playing with the layouts to get it to look nice. There we go. There's our two text fields. Actually, let's make it bigger again. Drag it out. There we go. There's text field 1 and text field 2. So for text field 1, put the number 12. Text field 2, the number 23. Click it. There we go. The sum is 35. So I just made a basic calculator by using text input fields and a button. Okay. So there are a lot of things you can do with the GUI. That's kind of the main ones that were covered in this week's material is, the J-frame, which is the entire window, a J-panel, which really a J-panel is just a container for other items. We made a custom J-panel that, lets us do some drawing onto it. And then we used, we made some text fields to get input from the user. We made a button so that when we click the button, we want to do something, and this is what we do, and we're all adding it to that content JPanel. Like I said, for the layouts, look at your course material. You can also look at the documentation online to see what layouts look best for you. I'm not, whenever you have an assignment doing GUI work, I'm not going to grade you on how the GUI looks. It doesn't have to look good. It has to be functional, but it doesn't have to look good. So, you know, whatever layouts that you want to choose will be completely up to you. But this right here is kind of the important thing, knowing what fields to put on there to get done what you want to do, and how to react to have something happens when a button is pushed. Okay, and that covers this week's material. Like I said, the actual assignment that is due this week, it's not GUI related. It's, you know, dialing back to last week and the week prior when we talked about inheritance, polymorphism, and extending classes, and so on and so forth. I cover that pretty extensive in my video from last week, so please review that. You can also ask me any questions you want via email, and I'll respond to them as quickly as possible. And yep, that will cover it for this week. So I'm open to any questions. While I'm waiting for questions, I'm going to do a different layout. I just don't like that. I'm not a fan of the border layout. Yeah, this layout looks better. Let's use this layout called a flow layout. Let's definitely use a flow layout instead. Layout, where's it at? So instead of border layout, we'll do a flow layout. Yeah. And so with a flow layout, we don't need these anymore. You'll see this will look a lot better. Again, this just depends on what you want to do for your layouts. Let's compile it and run that. There we go. That looks better. 123, 321, click me. There's our calculator. That looks better than, you know, how I had it before, so that's fine. Stop it. For the window, let's not set the size, and you'll see that it'll size your window automatically for you based on what your components are. Oh, there it is, actually too small. Oh, there it is. There's the window. Let's make it something bigger to cover more area on your screen. Here. Oh. Okay. All right. Doesn't seem like there are any questions. So I'll get this video uploaded. Please email me directly if you have any kind of questions at all. Especially, I mean, for this week's assignment, it's fairly easy, but the next assignments are going to be getting into GUI programming, and GUI programming is a lot more difficult than you know, normal linear method programming. All right, so everybody have a good night.